do we think about supply chains that are radically transformed? Going from the kind of evolutionary stage of how do we make these better places to work? How do we make them lean? How do we make them greener, more efficient? And then going to a place of saying, well, if what the customer wants is customization, and if what they want is speed to market, how do we start to go there? And what does that mean for a sustainable economy? And then you absolutely get to this place where you go, okay, but that's all still about material and consumption. And so how do you think about a new growth model for companies where you also add in the potential of different revenue streams coming from, say, services? And so all of that is in exploration for us, but we really have looked at it. So when we think about system change, that can get intimidating. So we're trying to break it down into what are the different types of innovation we can do that ultimately would add up to the equivalent in some ways. And it's too easy an example, but it does work, I think. Thinking about what the iTunes ecosystem and that innovation has done to records and a whole bunch of other technology.
What's a record?
As a former radio DJ, right. I have to tell you, I still have my vinyl, but it's obsolete. And I think that is what beautiful innovation should do. And I think that's what we're going to have to do with sustainability, is make today's status quo obsolete so that it just becomes the norm and the default option, because it's better and easier and, frankly, more delightful to the consumer. The consumer wouldn't buy this chair. And therein lies part of the issue today. And it's a broad sweeping judgment, and obviously the consumer is no one person. But all of our data and all of our consumer insights tells us a few things. One is never compromise performance and price for sustainability, or you will do a disservice to sustainability and you will ghettoize it. And you will continue with the mythology of sustainability equals less. And that, I think, is one of our greatest issues that we have at stake. So one is don't compromise in the eyes of the consumer. And the second is then give the consumer something they didn't even expect. You know, and again, it is the Apple lesson, but it's also the Nike lesson. I mean, it's really how do you create a demand for a new way of doing things.
In order to do a lot of the things that you're trying to do at Nike, it has to go through a set of filters. And sometimes in the process of that, you have to kill some sacred cows. Talk about that. What cows are you metaphorically killing?
I think we've had to kill a lot. I think we've had to kill a lot of projects and initiatives. And I think there are two things to it. One is, as sustainability practitioners, I think we get very passionate about what we do. And I think that's one of our greatest sources of energy and inspiration, and it's a huge tool. And it's also an Achilles heel, because I think it's harder to focus when you're passionate than if you're very kind of objective about does it fit in these criteria. So we really have built a filtering process that literally ranks things so that we keep that list narrow. And then I think the second piece to it...
You're ranking them in terms of the initiative and whether it's something you should do? It's a filter that says, is this a go, no-go for us as a company?
Absolutely, absolutely. And really, you know, the mandate from our CEO is absolutely create a balanced portfolio of innovation so you get some good short-term wins, mid-term wins, and long-term wins. But remember, it's the big disruptive stuff. You only need one. You just need one. And then you can really disrupt. So keep it really focused. And then also, you think we talked about this a bit earlier, I think we have a hard time letting go of things and knowing when to say, this was a great experiment, but we need to iterate it and change it or stop it because it's just not going to work. And I think, I would say that in our team and I myself, I think we have issues with that sometimes. I think it's a hard one.
What's been hard to let go of?
I have a lot of them.
Yeah. We're talking professional here.
Yeah, no. Well, I'm passionate about it, so it's hard. I think you have to make trade-offs, and I think in times of tighter resources. Sometimes we've had to make trade-offs about some of what is more traditionally expected out of a corporate responsibility team, maybe in some philanthropy, versus investing that money in some disruptive innovation potential ideas.
Or has your company come up with products where the sustainability attribute of the product actually enhances the performance of the product?
Yeah. Yeah, so the Jordan 23 is a great example, and I use it just because it's kind of iconic. If you're a sneakerhead, you may know that. But literally, because small technical detail, I don't know how many of you play basketball, but the force with which you land on your shoe on an ongoing basis if you're playing professional basketball is huge. And so most basketball shoes are made with glue, and most of them have metal plates in them and are really like pulled together. And so what Tinker did was he said, I want to get out of the business of using solvents. And I want to, at a minimum, use water-based solvents. And at a maximum, I actually want to get rid of the whole thing. And he actually worked with a factory to come up with a completely new technology about how he would do part of the shoe and then use stitching and geometry. And here we go to some of the learnings from biomimicry and things like that. Stitching and geometry to partially hold the whole shoe together. And it made for a better shoe, irrespective of sustainability. And it was a huge inspiration. Those are the breakthrough inspirations for us, because then what it does is it sends a shudder down the design community, which goes, wow, if I look at it through this parameter, it could actually push me to think differently about innovation. Frank Gehry, the architect, always says, give me a budget and a timeline. I say, give you a budget, a timeline, and sustainability. And then let's see what we get out of innovation. And that really comes to that first bit of our conversation. This is where I think at Nike we began to see both worlds can benefit from coming together.